Egypt is the gift of the Nile. This is a famous quote attributed to the Greek historian Herodotus. After all, without the Nile, the ancient Egyptian civilization would never have reached its apex. The Egyptian civilization established itself and flourished on the Nile banks. The Egyptians were absolutely aware of the river's decisive role for their own livelihood, and due to such paramount importance, the river was deemed sacred by the villages that lived off of it. The Nile is regarded as one of the world's largest rivers, competing for the first spot with the Amazon. Starting in Ethiopia and Kenya, the river bathes 11 different countries. When it reaches the Mediterranean Sea, the river splits itself into different branches, thus forming the Nile Delta. According to Egyptian mythology, the river Nile is associated with the god Hapi, the deity that personifies the great river. This is often depicted as an overweight figure, which, in antiquity, was a sign of a deity who had experienced a nourished and fertile existence. The river Nile was known for its floods, which engulfed massive areas along the banks. When the river returned to its normal course, the flooded lands became tremendously fertile, much due to the nutrient-filled sediments left by the river. To celebrate that fertility, the ancient Egyptians made offerings and sacrifices to Hapi for his generosity. These lands were extremely fertile, to the point of producing large amounts of agricultural surpluses. These were exported, which attracted a considerable flow of wealth into Egypt. Most civilizations that lived along the Mediterranean shores, such as the Greeks, the Romans, and the Phoenicians, imported cereals from Egypt to feed their people. There was a Nilometer in the city of Kom-Ombo, which was a type of well used to measure the Nile's flood levels. These measurements allowed to know approximately which lands were fertilized by the Nile. These would then pay more taxes to the state. In turn, those that had not been hit by the floods would see their taxes cut or even receive tax exemptions. The river was also quite important for the movement of people and goods throughout Egypt. Without the river, a large share of the pharaonic works built all over Egypt would be nothing short of impossible. After all, the transport of massive and heavy stones and obelisks from distant lands was only possible using the Nile sailing vessels. Although a gift, the river Nile also posed considerable dangers. Its waters were the shelter of dangerous creatures such as the gargantuan Nile crocodiles and dodgy hippos, which attacked vessels and destroyed agricultural areas. In addition to the dangers brought by the animals, the Nile floods were also a great hazard. Periodically, great floods hit the communities that lived on the river banks. However, if the Nile floods were insufficient, famine could devastate the whole of Egypt. Today, the Nile floods are now controlled by man due to the construction of dams like the one in Aswan. This dam was built to ensure the region's hydric safety while preventing catastrophic floods and generating electricity. Nevertheless, this same dam has also been a source of major environmental and archaeological impacts. The dam created lake-flooded large-sized areas filled with archaeological vestige. The renowned tomb of Abu Simbel was dismantled and later reassembled elsewhere. The construction of the dam had an impact on the river fauna as well. The populations of migratory fish suffered a massive drop, and so did the fertility of the land on the river banks. Currently, the river Nile is managed by man-made efforts, but this powerful force of nature continues to support the millions who live on its banks. Therefore, the famous quote of Herodotus remains true to this day, as Egypt is still a gift of the Nile.